welcome back to Plot Twist. I am extremely sorry for my long hiatus. I had some family issues that were coming up, and then the holidays came up, and then school started up again. A whole bunch of stuff just started happening. So I deeply apologize for that, but I am back, and I am ready to start reviewing and talking about books again, and hopefully get this channel back on track. A couple of updates. Um, as you know, I crochet. If you follow my channel, I did a video about this. It was a hobbies tag. So I crochet, and this year I have decided to do something called a book blanket. If anybody is familiar with crochet and knitting in general, there is something called a temperature blanket that people like to do every year, where they crochet a number of rows or knit a number of rows in various colors depending on the high or the low of that particular day, and they do it throughout the entire year. So, climate change is a bit of a downer, so I never really had much interest in the temperature. Some people do their moods, but mine varies so much that that wasn't going to happen. It was going to look like a rainbow threw up at a rave party after taking too much LSD. It was going to be bad. So I was struggling. I really wanted to do something that was going to last the entire year and maybe give me something to focus on, like a project that I could do a little bit at a time. And then I remembered I love books. So I decided to do a book blanket. So what I have here so far, I've already started it. I've read two books. Two blankets. I read two books so far this year. So they are categorized here in two different colors, in the beige color down here, and then this kind of a reddish color right here. And these white lines are just to separate when I've read a book. That way I don't have like a huge block of like red or purple. And I'll post what my criteria is. So essentially, what I'm doing here is I'm doing a certain number of rows based on number of pages, and they go in increments of about 150. So for example, this right here was, I believe, a 350 page book, roughly around that size. So this became about 15 rows. Whereas this was just a simple pattern book that was only about 150, maybe 200 pages. So this just became maybe about 4 or 5 rows. So nothing too insane. So if you're wondering what these colors mean, this red is a spicy romance. And then this beige was initially not in the plan, but I accidentally read a pattern book trying to get ideas for this, and I finished it, and it got counted on my Goodreads, so I had to put it in the blanket. And so beige is now a miscellaneous, kind of nonfiction, just general stuff that I don't normally read. So yeah, I am very excited about this blanket. I am really hoping that it turns into a beautiful menagerie of color in different size rows and things like that to really show what my reading interests were for the year of 2023. Second update. We have a new mascot. This is Sage. I shouldn't say new mascot. He is so far the only mascot we've ever had. But Sage the Dragon is over here. He loves books just as much. He hoards books instead of metal. And he is very happy to be here. Aren't you, Sage?
Yo, YouTube.
Alright.
Please tell Nakia my snout looks like a beast.
So, he's gonna pop up in videos. He's gonna have his own little comments to make. He might do some shorts as well. Who knows? Let's just get crazy with that. So yeah, that is pretty much it. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the books that I've read recently. As many of you know, I've been in a slump for a while. I seem to be slowly getting out of it. Jesse over at Bartell's Bookshelf has been doing something with me where we read for an hour every day together. So we turn everything off and we just read for a solid hour. And that just kind of gets us back in the mood. We can obviously read outside of it if we want to. But for me, it's just been helping me get back on track. It's been helping me do something that I love more often. So, in that case, I did manage to finish up a few books by the end of 2022. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk about those real quick. I was going to give each of these their own video, but I feel like I didn't really have quite enough to say about each of them to really do so. I could go into grand detail about these books, but I worried that was just too much. So the first book of 2022 that I finished, does that sound right? So this was the one of the books that I finished in 2022, Dragonkin Book 1, Wyvernwood. This is by Robin Wayne Bailey, and this was interesting. This follows 4 sets of trios. So we have Harrow, Chan, and Luna, which are the heirs to the Dragon Kingdom, essentially. Their father, Stormfire, long ago, had brought all the dragons to this place called Wyvernwood because the Age of Men was coming around. They were encroaching on territories for mythological beings and magical beings as well. So he just rounded everybody up. He rounded up all the other magical beings that he could and brought them to Wyvernwood so they would be able to live out their lives without men present. Well, that gets disrupted when men come to their shore. Now, these men are chasing a boat of children. There's 3 children that are in this little rowboat trying to escape from them. During their escape, they are attacked by 3 griffins. You see where these trios are coming in. So these 3 griffins are a father and a pair of sons who rule the griffins, essentially. They are our bad guys, for lack of a better term. They come in, they start harassing the humans, both the ones in the ship and the ones in the rowboat. So, at that same time, the dragons come in and save them. So, the triplet dragons save the humans, and Stormfire ends up protecting the children. He sees through the adult humans' lies that they're just trying to help them, and he ends up making them leave. So then it's found out that the children are actually escaped circus performers being treated as slaves. So he welcomes the children into Wyvernwood, at least until they can get on their feet and maybe... Meanwhile, while all this is going on, there is another dragon, a hummingbird, and a unicorn off on a journey to rescue a minotaur child. They get their own story happening, coinciding with the dragons, coinciding with the griffins, coinciding with the children. So it sounds incredibly complex, but Robin Wayne Bailey does an incredible job of keeping all the stories together. He makes them simple enough to follow. He makes them incredibly entertaining to follow as well. There is some wonderful humor. The unicorn, while she's like this dainty, beautiful, elegant, ethereal creature, she's not afraid to kick your ass. So that is something that I really like about this book. It has a lot of comedy, as well as mythology, as well as some serious points. Incredibly interesting. The book ended actually on a surprising note. It ended up on a plot twist that I was not expecting, considering I'm plot twist. That said, it does have some issues. Some of the obstacles that these characters have to overcome are overcome a little too easily. I wouldn't say they're not earned exactly, because they go through the work, but it just seems kind of glossed over. There's not a whole lot of real tension in some of these events that occur. So it gets kind of a point knocked off for that for me, but it doesn't necessarily make the story itself bad. So I immensely enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun reading this book. It is the first book in a series. I did not know this when I picked it up, even though it says book 1 in giant gold letters right there. But I am not the most observant person in the world. So, I am looking forward to reading the other books, but they're not exactly high on my list. Um, while things have not finished, while things have not been explained or anything like that, uh, the the book does end on a relatively satisfied note. Um, so while I am not keen on getting back to the others, I don't think that a serious break in reading the books is going to do me any harm. I think I'll be able to pick it up and remember fairly easily where we left off. The book I finished was Ink and Bone, the Great Library series by Rachel Caine. I did not know Rachel Caine was a rather famous author for a vampire series that she had written. I had never heard of her, but we can't all hear about every single author, of course. That said, this surprised the hell out of me. I loved this book. It's a book about books. How can you go wrong? So this book is set in a world where books are actually banned. So physical books like paper, ink, all that are banned. Instead, everybody has these magically, alchemically created blanks, or what they call blanks. So imagine, if you will, a composite notebook, essentially. And as you open the pages, the words appear. So there's kind of like an electronic book almost. You can definitely call it an ebook. And you get the story through that. And the Great Library, the Library of Alexandria, kind of closely dictates what everybody gets to read. So it's very interesting in that sense. And what this has done is created a market of book smugglers, which is where we come to our main character, Jess Brightwell. He is part of a very large syndicate family that smuggles books. And we open with him running a book to a potential buyer. And there is some chaos in following that. He comes across his city's branch of the Library of Alexandria. This is in London, an alternate London, obviously. And as he's going through the library courtyard, the animatronic lions that guard the place come to life and rip a crowd of people to shreds. So he's running away, listening to their screams, slipping around in the blood. It's intense. This is a young adult, so I've come to determine that there are no rules when it comes to young adult. As long as your intimate scenes are fade to black, it seems to be fine. So if anybody out there is writing a young adult book and you're worried about the cursing or the blood or the gore, don't worry about it. It's fine. As Jess is running the book, he finally makes it to the buyer. And then the buyer is this old, decrepit man who proceeds to eat the book. I'm not even joking. He is literally tearing out pages and eating them. He is licking the ink off of the page and tearing off little bits of paper and shoving it into his mouth, chewing and swallowing. He is going through the whole act. And that is kind of where our introduction to Jess Brightwell ends. And then we get the rest of his story. And as he goes through the story, this whole beautiful world unfolds where he is sent to an academy to become a scholar, or to become a librarian, actually. And he is doing this because his father insists that he goes. Now, why does his father want him to go? He wants just to steal books from the library and send them back to him. Jess is not keen on this, exactly. He loves books, and he just loves the feel of them. He loves to read them. He loves to feel paper in his hand. And he doesn't necessarily want any harm to come to them, but he's also been fed the lies that the library has been feeding the people for so long, and now he's conflicted. He's got the book smuggling past. He has his indoctrination, essentially, what he's been taught, and he's also been exposed to book burners. These people are protesters that feel like everybody should have access to any book they want, and in doing so, they burn books as a form of protest. I don't know. They also burn themselves, though. So there's actually a scene where Jess watches as a man sets himself on fire and dies a horribly slow, painful death. So yeah, it's a very intricate and beautiful world. Definitely one of my favorite books so far, and I haven't even read the rest of the series. I don't know where it goes. I haven't been able to find the other books except for online. So I haven't been able to get any used copies or anything like that, unfortunately. But I do intend on reading the rest of these books because this was just beautiful. There are many comments about knowledge, about access to writings and readings, access to knowledge, access to truth, and it's incredibly well thought out. It's very easy to follow as well. There are some beautiful descriptions here, and what I've talked about just now is just the tip of the iceberg of what happens in these books. So I definitely highly recommend this to anybody who is looking for something along this line. It is gorgeous, and you will love it. The last book I ended up reading for 2022, I'm sure many of you will know about, and I'm sure some of you will even recognize from the short that I did for it. That was Nick Cutter's The Troop. How do you describe this? This book was intense. It was the goriest, most visceral, disgusting, grotesque, beautiful book I think I've read in recent memory. So this book is just insane. So the very basics here. We are introduced to a scoutmaster and his scout troop, Troop 57, I believe they are, 52, 57, something around there. And they are going to an island just off of the coast of their small town, or just off the shore of their small town. It's not very far away, maybe a couple of miles at most, to the point where they can see lights and everything at night. They are there for the weekend to just kind of tough it out in the woods, as scouts do. They're there for hiking, for survival, and unfortunately they get a survival lesson out of a nightmare. As they are getting through their troop stuff, as they're going through their experience, a man comes up to the island. Now, this is a deserted island for the most part. There's nothing living there besides plants and animals. And it's very odd for anybody to be there. Now, there is an outpost there, so they do have a cabin, and they do have a radio to signal back to land and such, but otherwise it's mostly deserted throughout the year. So when the stranger comes up and is begging for food, obviously the scoutmaster, also being the town's only doctor, decides to try and help out. The kids, the 5 boys, are your typical 5 teenage boys. They're 14, 15, around there. And they're a bunch of psychopaths. I'm just gonna say it right now. Some of them are better than others, obviously. One of them is worse. I'm not gonna tell you which one. But he scares me. I still have issues with him. I've had nightmares about him. So that should tell you something. The man comes ashore, he is explaining that he's hungry. He's just so hungry. And this man is emaciated. He looks like he's been through hell. So obviously the scoutmaster tries to help him. And as he's going through that, it becomes apparent that the man is infested with a bioengineered tapeworm, or tapeworms, I should say. And that is where the horror begins. These tapeworms get loose after the man dies, and they start slowly infecting the troop. And without any ability to communicate with the mainland after the radio is broken, they struggle to survive until somebody can come and save them. And it is just, it's Lord of the Flies, but better. And I say that knowing full well that I might be a minority in this, but I did not like Lord of the Flies. I thought it was boring. I thought the kids just acted stupid. I wasn't expecting kids of that age to act anything like that, at least for the era that it was written in. But that said, I do know that human mentality can break easily, and humans are far more capable of horror than you would expect. And Cutter does a very good job of bringing that to light. He does not hold any punches either, and the way he describes certain things is just, what he's describing isn't necessarily bad. You've probably seen many of these things before in other horror books, maybe even horror films. You've read these described before, but not this way. Mr. Cutter does such an amazing job of describing something in a familiar way. He does it to the point where you will be able to see, smell, and taste, unfortunately, a lot of these different events that happen. And it's because he writes with the general familiarity of life. So most people can relate to having touched grass before, or wood, or something metal, getting shocked by a battery, something like that. Just brief static shocks. So he takes these little moments that we can all relate to and amplifies them into this insane, grotesque, visceral prose. So it is amazing. I loved it. It's been hyped a lot lately, I noticed. I know it's really popular right now. Does it deserve the hype? I think so. Now, I know things can get overhyped pretty quickly, and pretty well. And while this book did have a few issues, I thought it started out a little slow. It started out way too familiar to Lord of the Flies for me initially, but I stuck through it knowing that it was going to get worse. And I'm glad I did, because this is probably one of my favorite books right now. I immediately went out and bought another Nick Cutter book after reading this one, so I highly recommend it. I think anybody who is a fan of horror, especially the classic horror, along the lines of Stephen King and along the lines of Stephen King and Dean Koontz and those people, I think you'll enjoy this quite a lot. Actually, there's even a quote here by Stephen King saying that it's just classic, solid horror writing, and it is. It deserves every praise that it has. So yeah, definitely highly recommend. Go out, read it for yourself. If animal cruelty and things like that are huge triggers for you, be advised. Now, those scenes can be easily skipped, I believe, and they won't have any disastrous effect on this narrative. But if that's something that you just can't handle, then I would be cautious of reading this book. So that was it for 2022. I didn't read a whole lot, unfortunately, but I am hoping to read more, especially now that I have this blanket project, and I'm hoping that will get me to just continue reading, because as I want to crochet, I can go, oh, here's a book, let me read that real quick, and then I'll finish. So if anybody is interested in hearing more about the blanket, let me know. I'll have my criteria, like I said, posted somewhere that everybody can look at. So if you would like to make a blanket along with me, you're more than welcome to. It's very customizable. You can do it however you want, whatever stitch you want, whatever method you want, knitting, crochet, whatever you want to do. My friend Laura's even doing a cross stitch right now. She's got a bookmark that she's making, and she's just stitching books onto it and coloring them in based on whatever color she's associated that genre with. So yeah, it's really fun, and I hope all of you enjoy it, essentially. So yeah, thank you so much for being patient with me. Thank you so much for staying with me as well. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a wonderful day and keep reading.